Michael, you're here today to talk about the launch of the End High Cost Credit Alliance.
Yes.
This is something you've been working on for a year.
Yeah, just over a year, really, yeah. But, yeah.
So I wonder, what was it that made you think a year ago? Was there something you read, heard, someone you spoke to that made you think this now is the time to start work on something of this nature?
Well, I suppose it's been over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, really, that, you know, if you do have a bit of celebrity, then people ask you to come and support different causes and sort of get into conversations with people. And especially in the kind of area that I come from, in South Wales Valleys area, but also all over the country, really, I started to hear more and more about people struggling with money stuff and debt, and particularly around sort of high-cost credit providers. So we're talking about payday lenders and rent-to-own businesses, weekly payment stores they're called, and doorstop lending and that kind of stuff. And so I just noticed a pattern, really, and then it started kind of propping up with friends, family members, and you think this is a real issue. So I started looking into it. Actually, I saw the British comedian journalist John Oliver in America did a thing on his show over there where he bought up a lot of debt on what's called the secondary debt market, where essentially people who are handling a lot of people's debt, if they think that, well, they were just going to have to write it off, then they sell it at a massively decreased price to debt collection agencies or whoever might be interested in it. And so he ended up buying up a lot of this debt and just writing it off rather than trying to collect on it. And I thought, well, and that sort of got my interest, and I thought, well, you know, I could do something like that maybe. So I looked into it, and it's a little bit more complicated than that. And that started the whole process for me of looking into this issue, because, of course, what I realized was that if you to get rid of someone's debt, that doesn't get rid of the cause of what's bringing it there in the first place. So it led me to looking at that, led me to look at, well, why is there no better alternative? You know, people aren't stupid. They're not going to get into situations that are causing them massive problems if there's an alternative. So I started realizing that trying to curb the worst practices of companies has to be connected to supporting better practices at the same time. You know, if there's clearly a lot of demand for credit. So credit is good. Credit is a great tool, really useful, really important. Covers you for when, you know, unexpected things come down the line, or just periods in your life where you know you're going to have to need a bit of help. But a lot of people don't have access to mainstream credit, so, you know, bank loans or overdraft facilities, credit cards, for all kinds of reasons. So if you find yourself unable to access that mainstream credit, there are all these companies out there who have a huge amount of money to be able to pay to stuff leaflets through your door, put big adverts on your favorite TV shows, get involved with your local football club, whatever it might be, and make it really easy for you. You kind of go, here's cash on your doorstep. I can sort this out now. And all you've got to do is pay a little bit back each week. That's manageable. But you end up paying way, way more than someone like you or me would have to pay for the same goods or services. And that seemed unfair. And if you do get into trouble with payments back, then they're hounding you, banging on your door, calling phone, threatening you with court. There's no interest in working with you. It's not a relationship that has value in terms of creating some kind of security for you, you know. And so I started seeing that, well, there are companies who do that. There are companies who take a more responsible, you know, relationship to their customers. And the high cost bit of the credit, it's high cost in two ways. There's high cost in terms of the cost of borrowing, what we call the APR, the annual percentage rate, how much you're going to pay to borrow this money. But there's also a cost in terms of your relationship to your family, potentially, you know, the stress that comes on you because of this, the responsibility of the lender, it has a cost as well. If they don't pay any attention to whether you are in a position to be able to pay this stuff back, it's just give you the money. And in fact, at times in the past, people's business models were based on you getting into trouble, giving money to people who can't pay it back, because then you can charge them more. And if it's the weekly payment stores where you're buying goods and like refrigerators or a TV or something, they can take their goods back and still charge you more. So there's kind of there are companies that are targeting people who can least afford it, and that seemed unfair. So then I saw that there are these other companies, much smaller companies, who are trying to take a much more responsible relationship to this, and they'll work with you. They'll look at what your circumstances are. They'll work with you to see, well, what can What do you think you can afford? How can we make this work? And if it's not appropriate for you to have credit in this instance, then they'll work with you to give you the support and advice that you need in order to get to the point where you do have a platform that you can then, use in the future. But those companies, they have so much smaller marketing budgets for a start. So just getting the word out there is hard,
Sure.
Getting people aware that there are alternatives and looking at why those companies aren't able to stand up and compete with the big boys. And there's all kinds of complicated reasons for that. But the Alliance is about getting groups of organizations and individuals who are working in this area with all the same shared ideal of bringing the price of borrowing down and being more responsible in how you give credit to people and work with people on that, and strengthening the safety net for people who don't have access to credit. And instead of everyone working in their own individual areas, bring them together, coordinate the work, try and do multiple things at the same time, and work with regulators, work with policymakers, work with funders, work with the advice and support network and the fair finance providers, and let's see if we can shift the whole financial landscape of this, and hopefully in the end also influence capital flow in terms of the investment into these big companies who are doing high cost credit, and change it over into the more responsible fair finance providers. So that's the big picture.
And so, like you say, you have all these different independent companies who can't at the moment compete with the well-known brands or service providers that we do hear about. So what kind of difficulties have you experienced in the past year in trying to kind of elevate the awareness, also elevate their position in order so that people are more aware of these services, which are you would call more ethical?
Yeah, well, they're all companies that are not-for-profit companies for a start, so it's a fairly stark line. You've got the companies who are not making profits for shareholders. It's all the money any money that gets made goes back into the company in order to bring the price of borrowing down for the customer. That's a big thing. So that these other companies are totally maximizing their profits off the financial difficulties of a lot of people at times. That's not to say that everybody who's taking out loans with these sort of companies are in a vulnerable situation, but a lot of people are, and they are targeted for it. So these not-for-profit companies, well, there's already a thing. So what's difficult for those companies is, in terms of getting the capital to be able to make loans to people, they themselves have to take loans. They themselves have to look for money, and they're sometimes juggling multiple loans, servicing those loans themselves, just like a lot of the customers are with high-cost credit providers. People take out other loans to cover the fact that they can't pay the original loan, and it spirals. So you've got a lot of these smaller companies having to deal with that. They're also, obviously, the more people who come out and take loans out with them, the more they can bring the price down. It's supply and demand. But because they don't have big marketing budgets compared to these big companies, the marketing budget of a company like Scott Cash or something is about £10,000 for a year. Some of these big companies have got £5 million to spend on adverts and stuff per year. So just getting the word out there, just being aware of it. I think a lot of people who find themselves in a position where, more and more people are having to go to high cost credit just to cover household costs, basic household costs. This is not about having some splurge on a holiday or whatever it might be. It can be basic household costs. A lot of those people don't realize that they have options, that there are other alternatives. So it's about supporting them, trying to work out a way for them to have access to capital at a better rate and without multiple sources of it. And it's about trying to get more awareness that they exist and allowing people to have an easier route to them. Because then a lot of the time it's word of mouth that is getting this around, because people are so much happier with these companies and feel so much more secure. Yesterday I was at Parliament for the launch of a report from the Royal Society for Public Health about the impact on our mental and physical health of certain credit products. And I don't think it would be a surprise to people that the top four in terms of having the worst impact on our health would be payday lenders, unarranged overdrafts, doorstop lending, and rent-to-own businesses. It's taking a toll on us, and people aren't going to voluntarily get into that situation if they know there's a better alternative. And once they are with them, with more responsible and fair credit providers, it makes a massive difference. This is a relationship for life. This is something, people aren't just looking for money once. They, Christmas comes every year, and a lot of families, that is a difficult period and a stretch. And if we want to stop people from feeling financially excluded and feeling on the outside of our society, then we have to find a better safety net and security for them. And I think these companies can provide that.
I mean, you mentioned there the Royal Society of Public Health, their report, and the impact debt has on lives. Like you say, it's not just financial, it's also the impact on mental health. This sounds like a facile question, but were you shocked at how people are left feeling by the stresses and strains? Was it far worse than you could have ever have envisaged?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, I've had a lot of opportunity in my life, and I've had a very privileged life in many ways. Where I come from is not like that. I didn't start off like that, but being able to hear people's stories and see the circumstances they're in a lot of the time, it was really shocking. I was talking to someone yesterday who'd got to the point where he was juggling multiple loans, like I say, having to take out other loans in order to cover the first one. Companies were, have another one. There's no sense of responsibility about, whether this guy's going to get into trouble. His life just started falling apart. He applied for something like 250 jobs. He was starting to get ill. His stress levels were so high. It got to the point where he was suicidal, and he was thinking about killing himself because he felt he had no way out. I mean, that's a situation that you don't want anyone to get into. And this was a guy who was on his own. He didn't have dependent children. Didn't have a family to. So you think about a lot of the people who are in this situation. A lot of them are women who are taking out loans in order to pay for stuff for their children. This isn't about having some crazy glamorous life. No. It's basic things, and the stress of that is enormous. And you hear story after story about people. Something as simple as going, I don't think I can go out on the weekend with my friends because I know I'll have to pay for a round of drinks and I can't afford it. So you can see how social exclusion can start to happen, and the fact that it's really difficult to talk about this stuff. I worry about a lot of young people whose parents have never talked to them about money. My parents never talked to me about money because they want to protect you from that. And so you're just going into the world completely naive about this stuff. Meanwhile, there are all these companies who think you're ripe for being targeted, right? Here's some cash, it's going to be fine, and you can easily get into trouble like that. So I do worry about that kind of thing as well. But you can see how it starts to prey on people. You don't feel like you want to talk to anyone about it because you're ashamed, and you don't want to admit maybe how bad the problem is until it's too late and you're just totally overwhelmed.
But the stigma of admitting that you need credit to just pay the bills.
Yeah, and that once you do get into trouble, once you are missing payments and suddenly they're pouring charges on top of that and hounding you, then the idea of being able to say, I can't cope with my life, we see it as being weak and stupid, and there's a lot of judgment that comes with that. So it's no wonder that people sort of clam up, but then it just gets worse and worse and worse. People who drink more, people who smoke more, anything you do more, just to cope with it, and so it becomes a spiral, and you can't get out of it, or you feel like you can't get out of it. Apparently there are 6 million people in Britain at the moment who feel like they will never get out of debt. I mean, that's a scary, scary thing. The figures speak for themselves. Last year, 1.4 million people used high-cost credit just to cover basic household costs. 9 million people are using credit. Using this sort of high-cost credit anyway. It's a scary thing.
And you say about the End High Cost Credit Alliance, its aim is to shift the landscape, shift the way finance operates in this country.
Well, we want it to be a level. We want it to be a fair playing field, rather than everything being weighted toward. Not because there's some conspiracy, but the way the landscape looks at the moment in terms of credit, it's all weighted towards these companies who take no responsibility for their actions on the customers. It's about absolutely trying to maximize their profits. And we want to shift that landscape so that the people who are out there are actually trying to give people a fairer deal and be more responsible, that they're able to compete. And at the moment, a lot of the areas, regulation, policy, funding, all weights things against them, and we want to change that fundamentally.
I mean, some of the companies that we could mention, but some of these operators, they operate legally.
It's all within the laws, absolutely. Yeah.
So, do you think something has gone badly wrong somewhere for this to be the case where these companies are in this gap to give credit to people who...
Yeah, I think, like I say, I don't think there's some terrible conspiracy here going on. It's just a lot of disconnected, and that's the point of the alliance, is to try and connect up the thinking around this. But, you know, historically, you look back, there was a lot of deregulation done in the 70s around credit, and that opened the way. Technology came in, so suddenly there's online stuff happening, there's access to stuff happening a lot more. And then, of course, when in the 90s, the late 90s, a lot of work being done around financial exclusion that started to create really good steps. But then as soon as the crash happened in 2008, suddenly you've got a perfect storm in a way, where you've got technology making access to high-cost credit that's been deregulated in the past much more accessible, and you've got people being squeezed from above with wages not moving, earnings not going up, inflation rising higher, people are getting squeezed, people find themselves having to use more of this high cost credit, and the companies that started up in order to try and balance that out found themselves, you know, on an unlevel playing field, and we want to try and put that right now.
I mean, there was a report from Trust of London last year which said that 58% of Londoners in poverty live in a working family. That 2.3 million people in London are classified as being in poverty.
Yeah.
Is it your... I mean, where can they go for help? Because you know, obviously this alliance is for people in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the point is that to say that there is help. You know, your only option isn't to go to high-cost credit providers who are just going to leave you high and dry. You know, there is help. First of all, if you're getting into trouble with debt and money is spiraling, you know, money issues are spiraling out of control, the first port of call is to go to somewhere like Money Advice Service or Citizens Advice or MoneySavingExpert.com. Those are three guaranteed places. If you go to that, you will get help, you will get advice, and they will take on board whatever, no matter, there's no judgment, there's no shame. You know, they're dealing with people who feel out of control. That's the first thing. They will also then be able to point you in the direction of the alternatives in terms of credit, the fair, responsible providers, as I would call them. They'll be able to point you in that direction because they don't have the same kind of marketing stuff. So that's the first thing. If you got now, the more people who find themselves going there, they will work with you, no matter what your circumstances are, to give you support and advice. And if credit is an option, if there is a way to be able to work through it, then they will do that with you. But if it's not, they'll be able to point you in the direction of getting the support that you need. And
do you think if you were coming to London now as someone trying to make their way, trying to make a career, could you see yourself falling into that trap? Do you think it's far easier than maybe some people might realise?
Oh my God! I mean, I think it's very, very easy to fall, you know, between the cracks. When I came to London, like I said, I left South Wales to come to drama school here. I didn't have a clue about money. I mean, I was very fortunate that I got a grant at the time. A lot of people don't even get that now. So I had I was living on very small amount of money. But if I'd had someone coming up and waving cash under my nose and saying, "Oh, this is going to be fine," or "Here's a credit card," I would have had real trouble. I know I would have, so I'm really grateful that I didn't have to deal with that. But I do worry about the young people, you know, coming through now, especially people who are dealing with student debt as well, and not really understanding the process. You know, it seems so easy, it seems so accessible, and yet the idea of how much you're going to pay over time is never quite put, you know, it's never made that clear to you because it doesn't really serve those people's interests. So I would have had a terrible time. Yeah.
And you mentioned the sort of the relationship that these credit providers that you would champion can have with their customers, with people, where it's a lifetime relationship.
Absolutely.
Is it? I was sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask you, is that the relationship you're going to have with Alliance? I mean, you've put some of your own resources into this, as well as a lot of your time. Is this something now that you will be with for as long as you can imagine? Are you in for the long haul?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one issue of many interconnected issues that I'm, you know, working on now and focusing on now, and it's something that I'm going to put all my resources into, and you know, there are multiple resources. Time is one of them, money is another one, influence is another one, access to media is another one, and the ability to bring people together who might not normally sit in the same room together, you know, that's another one as well. And so I'm trying to bring everything to bear on doing this, and it's, yeah, for the long haul, and I want to be able to you know, use whatever I can to make a difference. I feel like this is one of the major challenges to a lot of the communities, certainly in the communities that in the area that I come from, but across the entire UK. But there are lots of them, and I feel like if people like myself who do have an opportunity to have a bit of independence, you know, I'm not working for a political party, I'm not working for an organisation, I'm not looking for votes, I'm not, you know, not making money out of it. So that already starts to slightly shift the focus of things. For a lot of people who are working in this area, I think they're prepared to get behind something that has a bit of independence that maybe they wouldn't normally. So I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think it was having an effect, a positive effect in some way. If I wasn't having a positive effect, I'd go and do something else. I got, you know, there's plenty else to do. So so this is one aspect of lots of interconnected issues, I think, and if I can do something, then I want to.
I mean, your passion, your articulacy is so evident. I mean, have you thought about office? You say you're not doing this for votes. Obviously, it's not. It's nothing to do with any kind of political campaign. But have you considered running for office?
Well, I suppose the clue is in what I said already, which is that suddenly then I'd have to toe a party line. I wouldn't be able to look at what the actual problems are, and no matter what the solution is, go for it. Because if the solution meant that it helped that party rather, you know, the ideology of that, and I don't want to be bothered with any of that. You want to look at what the problem is and do something about it that's really going to help. I don't want to be arguing about ideology or, you know, any of that. And also different organizations, they have certain remits. There are boundaries to what they can work on, because that's what, you know, whatever funding they get, I don't want to be stuck behind that, so I don't want to work for anyone if I don't have to. I don't want to be part of a political party if I don't have to. So I feel I can be more effective with the freedom and independence that I have. Why would I give that up, you know? And
just finally, how, with your commitment to this, how are you finding juggling work at the same time? Because you just wrapped on Good Omens, which is a pretty big project, which is filming across different hemispheres.
Yeah, 6 months.
6 months and like big commitment. Dr. Dolittle, you're working on at the moment. How are you finding juggling these major commitments?
Yeah, well, a lot easier now, because for you know, like I say, over the last 7 or 8 years, as I've got more and more involved in this kind of work, it was becoming a problem, because I was trying to fit it in around the acting stuff, and it got to the point where I realised I just couldn't sustain that, you know. So I knew that I either had to take a step back and scale down how much I was involved, or I had to fundamentally shift what I was doing and take a much bigger step forwards. And it just so happened that the circumstances of my life allowed me to take a bigger step forward. So instead of the acting career being at the front and everything else fitting in around it, it's flipped, and it's the other way around now. So now I use the acting stuff to be able to fund and give me the leverage to do, you know, this kind of work. So now acting jobs, I'm very lucky that I have a bit of choice in what I can do, so if an acting job comes along, if it fits with what I'm already committed to around these areas, then I'll work with them and say, well, look, if you can give me this time off and that time off and this time off, and then great. And if not, all the best, and I'll go and do something else. So at the moment, that seems to be working out all right. But that's an ongoing, you know, this is new territory for me, really, so we'll see how it goes. Maybe people will stop offering me acting jobs, I don't know. Then we'll have a problem, but we'll see.
And I'm just very quick, I heard that Robert Downey Jr. has got quite a big hat in Dr. Dolittle.
Right.
Is that, have you got a comparatively sized hat to wear?
You know, someone said that, someone had a theory that people who you've seen on screen, you know, famous people or whatever, when you meet them, they've all got massive heads. I think it's because we get used to seeing their face more than anything else. So when you meet them in real life, their face is really familiar, but their body isn't, so their faces seem much bigger. I haven't noticed that Robert Downey Jr. has got a massive head, though. I mean, I've got a bit of forehead going on.
Oh, so. I said hat. I mean, I was a bit...
yeah, but then the hat would go with it,
yeah,
wouldn't it?
I suppose. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers, thank you. Thank you, everyone.